In the 3rd century, Rome started mixing cheaper metals into its silver coins. The denarius, the standard coin soldiers were paid in, merchants traded in, families saved in, went from nearly pure silver to less than 5%. It happened gradually. Year by year, the coins got lighter, the silver content lower. Soldiers noticed, merchants noticed, prices exploded. The empire that ruled the known world was brought to its knees, not by an invasion but by debasing its own money, and the people who held real gold and real silver outside the system, they were the last ones standing. That was 1,700 years ago. The pattern hasn't changed. 4,000 years ago, a king stored his wealth in gold. His blacksmith stored his in silver. When the kingdom fell, both survived. The merchants, who held only the king's promises, lost everything. Gold and silver have outlasted every empire, every currency, and every financial system humans have ever built. But they're not the same thing. They don't behave the same way in a crisis. One is more stable, the other is more useful, and most people pick the wrong one for their situation. This is gold versus silver across 5 real crises. Not theory, not what some analyst thinks might happen. What actually happened, with real prices, real people, and real outcomes. Recently, I showed how many hours of labor it took to buy 1 ounce of gold across 2,000 years. But I left out the other metal, the one regular people actually used. Today we fix that. I'm going to judge each metal on 3 things. Can it preserve your purchasing power? Can you actually spend it when you need to? And does it become a target for governments, for regulations, for confiscation? Preserve, spend, rules. Those are the 3 keys. Let's see who holds all 3. Gold and silver are not the same asset at different price points. They play completely different roles. Gold is a pure monetary metal. Central banks hold it. Sovereign wealth funds hold it. Its industrial use is minimal. When you buy gold, you're making one bet that humans will continue treating this metal as a store of value. That bet has been correct for 5,000 years. Gold has one driver, fear. When fear goes up, gold goes up. Simple. Silver has a dual nature. About half of all demand is industrial. Solar panels, electronics, medical instruments, batteries. The other half is monetary. Coins, bars, investment. This split is what makes silver unpredictable. In a recession, industrial demand drops and drags silver's price down. But at the exact same time, monetary panic pushes demand up. 2 forces pulling in opposite directions. Which one wins depends on the type of crisis. Think of it this way. Gold saves the big ticket, silver runs the weekly budget. Both matter, but they matter at different moments. Let's see when. Crisis 1. Weimar Germany, 1920 to 1923. This one is about spending. By the peak of the hyperinflation, 1 ounce of gold could buy a house in central Berlin. The mark was worthless. People burned banknotes for heat because the paper was worth more as fuel than as money. Anyone who had converted their savings to gold before the crisis came through with their wealth intact. But here's what nobody mentions. Most regular Germans didn't have gold. They couldn't afford it. What they had was silver coins, pre-war silver marks, and those coins held real value throughout the crisis, not because of the number stamped on them, but because of the metal inside. A silver coin could cover several days of food. Because the value was in the metal, not the denomination, you could walk into a shop and trade it directly. Try doing that with a gold bar. Nobody has change for a gold bar when the currency has collapsed. You can't buy milk with something worth a house. Gold preserved fortunes. Silver bought groceries. In a real crisis, where you need to eat and pay rent and keep the lights on, that distinction is the difference between surviving in theory and surviving in practice. Crisis 2. The Great Depression, 1933. This one is about rules. In April of 1933, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. Private ownership of gold was effectively banned in the United States. Citizens were required to turn in their gold coins, bullion, and certificates to the Federal Reserve. The penalty for non-compliance was up to 10 years in prison. Silver? Not touched. Silver coins continued to circulate freely. Silver was considered too practical, too embedded in daily commerce to confiscate. While gold owners were forced to sell at $20.67 per ounce, and then watched as Roosevelt revalued gold to $35, effectively taking 40% of their purchasing power, silver holders just went on using their money. This is a risk most gold investors don't consider. Governments have restricted gold before. The U.S. in 1933. The U.K. had exchange controls that limited private gold transactions until the late 70s. Australia had a framework requiring compulsory sale of gold to the central bank for decades. The pattern is consistent. Concentrated value becomes a target when governments need control. That's not a guarantee it will happen again. It's a historical pattern. Governments tend to go after the asset with the most concentrated value first. Gold fits that profile. Silver, bulky, common, woven into everyday commerce, flies under the radar. Gold preserved wealth better on paper. Silver preserved freedom of transaction. In a world where the government is rewriting the rules, that freedom might matter more. Both metals showed up in every crisis I just covered. That's not a coincidence. I made a full video on the 6 asset categories that have survived every major crisis in 4,000 years of recorded history. Gold is one of them. If you want the complete picture, that video is on screen now. Crisis 3. The 1970s, stagflation, the end of the gold standard, and the biggest precious metals bull market in modern history. This one is about asymmetry. In August of 1971, Nixon took the dollar off gold. The dollar was no longer backed by anything physical. Over the next decade, as inflation ran into double digits, both metals exploded. Gold went from $35 to $850 by January of 1980, roughly a 24 times increase. Silver went from $1.30 to $50, 38 times. Part of that spike was amplified by the Hunt brothers, 2 Texas billionaires who tried to corner the silver market, at one point holding roughly a third of the world's privately owned supply. But underneath the speculation, the fundamental trend was real. Silver was responding to the same fear as gold, just louder. Then came the crash. Silver dropped from 50 back to 5 within 2 years, 90% gone. Gold fell from 850 to around 300, then stabilized above 400 for years. Gold lost half. Silver lost 90%. Here's the rule. Gold is insurance. Silver is leverage. Silver climbs faster and falls harder. If you time it right, you make a fortune. If you time it wrong, silver can lose 90% of its value while gold loses half. That asymmetry is the defining characteristic of silver as a crisis asset. Crisis 4. 2008. The global financial crisis. This one reveals the pattern that matters most. When Lehman collapsed and the system froze, gold dipped briefly, then climbed. By the end of 2009, gold was up about 25% from pre-crisis levels. Textbook safe haven behavior. Silver collapsed from around $20 to below $9, a 55% drop. In the middle of a financial crisis, the exact moment you'd think a monetary metal would shine, silver was getting crushed. Why? Factories shut down. Construction stopped. Every industrial use of silver evaporated, and that dragged the price down even as monetary demand was rising. Picture 2 forces in a tug of war. On one side, factories stopping, silver demand down. On the other, fear spiking, silver coin demand up. In 2008, the factory side won first. Then the fear side took over. Silver recovered to almost 50 by 2011. Anyone who bought at 9 made 5 times their money in less than 3 years. But you had to have the conviction to buy a collapsing asset during the worst financial crisis in 80 years. Most people sell at 9, they don't buy. The lesson is simple. In a financial crisis, Gold goes up when you need it to. Silver goes down first, then up later. That down first part can ruin you if you need the money immediately. Crisis 5. 2020. The pandemic. Same pattern faster. Gold hit an all-time high above $2,000 in August of 2020. Steady climb. No surprises, no drama. Central banks were printing trillions. Governments were spending trillions. Gold did exactly what everyone expected. Classic. Silver dropped to 12 in March as the world locked down, then reversed hard. By August 29, 140% in 5 months. Same story as 2008. Silver crashes with the economy, catches up, and then passes gold on the recovery. If you held gold through the pandemic, you slept well. Your hedge worked exactly as designed. If you bought silver at 12, you nearly tripled your money within months. But if you bought silver at 25 before the crash and watched it drop to 12, you were down over 50% on your crisis hedge during the crisis. That's not a comfortable place to be. Gold is the asset you hold to not think about. Silver is the asset you have to actively manage. One is an insurance policy. The other is closer to a trade. There's a number that ties all of this together, the gold to silver ratio. It tells you how many ounces of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold. For most of recorded history, that number sat around 15 to 1. Under the Roman Empire, 12 to 1. When the U.S. established its monetary system in 1792, Congress set it at 15 to 1. In the modern era, the ratio fluctuates in a much wider range, roughly 50 to 90. It spiked above 100 during the pandemic panic in 2020 and compressed below 50 in periods when silver was catching up. The ratio moves constantly, and where it sits at any given moment tells you something about the relative pricing of these two metals. Here's what matters. When the ratio is historically high, silver is cheap relative to gold. And in crises, the ratio tends to compress, sometimes violently. In the late 70s, it hit 15 to 1. In 2011, 32 to 1. When it compresses, silver outperforms gold dramatically. This doesn't mean the ratio will compress tomorrow. It can stay elevated for years. But if you believe the monetary system will come under stress again, and history says it will, then silver at a high ratio has more room to move than gold does. That's not a prediction, it's arithmetic. I recently published a video showing how much work it takes to earn 1 ounce of gold across 2,000 years, from Roman soldiers to modern minimum wage workers. If you want to see how gold's purchasing power has held up measured in human labor, that video is on screen right now. So which one should you hold? Here's the honest answer. If you're protecting a large amount of wealth for the long term, retirement savings, generational transfer, something you don't plan to touch for decades, gold. It's denser in value, easier to store, more stable. $25,000 in gold fits in your hand. $25,000 in silver weighs over 50 pounds. For long-term storage, gold is more practical. If you want something you can actually use in a crisis, trade for goods, buy essentials, divide into small transactions, silver. A 1 ounce silver coin is a practical denomination for buying food, paying for services, or settling a debt face-to-face. It's the right size for the real economy. Try spending a $2,000 gold coin on groceries and see what happens. In a mild downturn, a recession, a correction, gold is more stable. It does its job without drama. In a severe crisis, banking collapse, currency devaluation, both metals work. But silver becomes more practical for daily survival. You can't buy bread with a gold bar. You can with a silver coin. In a full currency crisis, Weimar, Argentina, Venezuela, both become essential. Gold preserves your wealth. Silver keeps you alive while your wealth waits for a new system to emerge. And here's the honest knife. If you can't tolerate a 50% drawdown during the crisis itself, silver cannot be your hedge. 2008 and 2020 prove that. Silver drops first. If you need the money the moment everything breaks, silver will fail you at the worst possible time. Gold won't. The right answer for most people isn't gold or silver. It's gold and silver. Your wealth in gold. Your liquidity in silver. Different amounts for different purposes in different scenarios. Gold is the vault key. Silver is the cash register. You need both in the building. This isn't about being a precious metals fanatic. It's about understanding that these two assets have done the same job for 5,000 years, but they do it differently. Gold is the anchor. Silver is the lifeboat. The king held gold. The blacksmith held silver. When the kingdom fell, both walked away. The people holding the king's paper promises did not. Preserve